Welcome back to Kings of the North. Doug Lesmerises, Bill Landis, and it's Jimbo Fisher, $77 million for doing nothing day. We are going to change it up a little bit here. We normally start off with the frantic 14. 7 topics, 2 minutes each, but we're going to do all coaches, Landis, because the SEC is just a fire in people. And so we're going to check in on some Northern coaches to make sure that they're not getting Jimboed.
I don't think I'd mind getting Jimboed. $77 million to do nothing? That sounds pretty great.
Debate. It's not everyone's goal in life to build yourself up, reach a peak, get overcompensated, and then get paid to do nothing.
That's the American dream.
Yeah, I think about that a lot, right? Because that's what I think I want to do. But then, like, my example of, and we're going to do some other college football stuff. We're going to do the playoff brackets. We're going to rank the best defenses in the North, the best offenses in the North, and then we'll get to look ahead. But you know the guy that I always think of who is like, when you get enough money, and it's like, why would you work anymore? You have all the money you could ever want. Just stop working and hang out and travel, right?
Yeah.
I always think of Craig Kilborn.
Oh.
Because he had a show,
yeah.
And then he was in that, he was in Old School, and he got, his car fell off a bridge, and then he just vanished. And I think he was like, I got enough money. Why would I keep hosting a show every night when I have enough money? And then the world has passed him by, and then sometimes I think, I don't know, would you want to do a little something? He's on an island. Jimbo can go to Craig Kilborn Island right now, but will that make him truly happy?
Are we sure that like Craig Kilborn's not working at Costco?
He has money. He has millions of dollars.
His net worth, according to my deep internet research, is $7 million.
That's enough. That's enough. It's 1/11 of what Texas A&M owes Jimbo Fisher, but it's enough. So anyway, I don't know. Maybe Craig Kilborn can be Penn State's offensive coordinator. We'll get to that in a second. But the thing that I don't like about this stuff and why we're checking on our Northern coaches is because paying coaches lots of money and then firing them and paying them lots of money to do nothing is like a badge of honor in the South. And I don't think it's a badge of honor. Our standards are ridiculous. Our hires are poor and our triggers are quick. It just means more. It's like, is that what that means? What are we to make of this when Jimbo Fisher gets fired at Texas A&M and then on Monday morning, Mississippi State fires Zach Arnett, who was forced to take over after the tragic death of Mike Leach, and they didn't even let him get through the year. It's like, could you give the guy who's forced into a very difficult situation, could you give him until no, we got to move now. But he had to we're Mississippi State. We have to move now. If we don't move now, we won't be Mississippi State anymore. I don't know, Landis. They like firing coaches down there, man.
They do like firing coaches. It is funny, like when we have these conversations about Northern coaches, and we'll have some here in a few minutes, it's always like, well, with the buyout. It's the buyout. You can't do it. It's the buyout. And in this SEC, it's like, yeah, the buyout exists. Whatever. we're moving on to the next thing. Like, it is
got oil money.
It is never an impediment, but not even at places like Texas A&M. Like, I don't think there's a program in the SEC that would blink twice about paying a $20 million buyout to get rid of a head coach if they didn't think he was good enough. And I think most programs, maybe every program, including like Ohio State, I think would see that number like, oh, we can't do that. That's absurd.
The Athletic had a very nice chart of like the largest buyouts ever paid for fired college football head coaches. They had the top 12. Do you want to guess 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12? How many of the top 12 were in the South versus how many were in the North?
12.
There were actually 2 in the North. Charlie Weiss at Notre Dame, which is just like, sometimes you got to do what you got to do. And Scott Frost at Nebraska.
Oh, I forgot about
Scott. Were the only 2 Northern ones. Otherwise, it's Jimbo Fisher, Texas A&M, Gus Malzahn at Auburn, Willie Taggart at Florida State, Tom Herman at Texas, Will Muschamp at South Carolina, a bunch of other people. Now, the thing Texas A&M hopes is like, okay, well, Texas did it, paid Tom Herman a lot. They got Steve Sarkisian, and here they are at the edge of the playoff discussion. Florida State does it with Willie Taggart. They get Mike Norvell. Here Florida State is, and they're on track for the playoffs. So, like, that's sometimes like it works, which is why Texas A&M is doing this, even though they can't have any idea who they're going to get. They just know they don't want that anymore, even though when they brought Jimbo over from Florida State, they thought it was the greatest hire ever.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's easier because I always think it's funny when programs do this without like a clear next step. But I suppose it's easier to not have the next step when money is no object. Like,
yeah,
you'll just pay whatever it takes.
So I don't know. Is that what we don't here at Kings North, we don't aspire to that. Do we aspire to set money on fire?
I did not think we aspire to that. I think you reminded me of this with Scott Frost. I think the one program who can probably get itself there the quickest is Nebraska.
Yeah.
But other than that, I don't think that's the way we do business up here.
Okay. So we're gonna make it a Jimbo check, a coach check. We're gonna run through some Northern coaches that we just want to check in on, good and bad, inspired by the demise of the once great Jimbo Fisher. All right, we're going to start number 1 with James Franklin at Penn State. Penn State didn't fire their head coach, but they did fire their offensive coordinator, Mike Yurcich. Terrible offensive performances for Penn State against Michigan, against Ohio State, and there are only 2 games that mattered. Non-functional passing offense. James Franklin said it in the post-game news conference after the loss to Michigan on Saturday. We got to do a better job of getting our quarterback in rhythm. It was like, uh-oh.
Mm-hmm.
What do we think of James Franklin's litany of offensive coordinators at Penn State, and what does it mean for his future there?
So this will be his 6th. He's in his 10th season. He will be hiring his 6th offensive coordinator after this season. And like, they haven't all been disasters. Or like Joe Moorhead was a good hire. Joe Moorhead left to go be a head coach. Ricky Ronnie, I don't think was terrible. And then he left to go be a head coach. And then there were some terrible hires mixed in there with those what I would say good ones. So it's not like it's been miss after miss after miss after miss, but it's been a revolving door and one that has held back, I think, Penn State's program. And I think it's like James Franklin brings in these new coordinators, but I think he doesn't say like, here's the offense, run it. But I do think the offense more or less takes on what James Franklin wants it to be, even though he's not a coordinator, nor is he a play caller. He has an idea of what he wants the offense to look like. And I do think that they've run into some problems with like clashing of ideas and ways to go about business between what James Franklin wants and between what the coordinator might think is best. And that's how you end up with, coordinator number 6 after 10 years.
So should he let it go? I mean, this is not uncommon. Most head coaches say like, hey, like Urban Meyer always said, you're coming to run the Ohio State offense. You're coming to run like you're the boss, but you're in my system. Should James Franklin let it go? And would that make things better offensively for them?
Yes, it would. It wouldn't address all the issues at Penn State, but it would address a big one. I think if he were just more hands off, because he's nearly there. I feel like with the CEO approach. But I do think, and it's like I never want to say a head coach medals because like it's his program, but I think he is involved with the offense to the extent that it's detrimental to the operation, and maybe he should pull back a little bit, if not all the way.
You think Jimbo would like a nice little condo in State College, Pennsylvania?
Yeah, that'd be funny. That head coach who can't quite take his hands out of the pie on offense hires a failed head coach because he couldn't take his hands out of the pie on offense.
I mean, they hired Manny Diaz when he got booted at Miami to be the defensive coordinator. Like, this is the time to go find some guys like, who can maybe figure something out offensively. James Franklin's making $7.5 million a year, signed through 2031. Like, he's not going anywhere.
No.
He actually has the largest buyout in the North right now. Like, if Penn State was like, okay, it's not just Yurcich, it's you, which they're definitely not going to do. But is this like a line in the sand moment for James Franklin, or just kind of like more of the same? Or does this have to be different?
I think it has to be.
Okay.
The difficulty with James Franklin is you're going to win 10 games probably every year or most years. And a lot of years that's going to be good enough to make the expanded college football playoff. Why on earth would you have any faith in his ability to win once he got there?
Yeah.
He can't beat Ohio State. He can't beat Michigan. He can't beat top 10 teams. I went through and looked like at because everyone's like, oh, Penn State will benefit the most from the expanded playoff. That is true if the extent of your benefit is merely making it. In 2016, they would have been a 4 seed hosting Ohio State. You don't have any faith James Franklin wins that game. 2017, they would have been 9 seed playing at USC. I don't think you have any faith that James Franklin wins that game. 2018, it would have been a 12 seed playing at Notre Dame. Nope. 2019, 10 seed playing at Baylor. Maybe. 2022, an 11 seed playing at Ohio State. He can't win big games.
Yeah.
And like, you're right. Penn State's not going to pay the money to get rid of them because they're not Texas A&M. But it's not merely a question of like, are you happy with winning 10 games every year and simply making the playoff? Because I think Penn State aspires for more than that, but I don't think they have a head coach that can get them there. Now they're stuck with them because they can't afford to get rid of them.
All right, number 2. Well, we're not going to solve Penn State right now, but I took this as a good sign, right? Because you watched the Penn State Michigan game and you were like, this is the greatest disparity on the field. There was like Michigan's offensive play calling when they also had problems versus Penn State's offensive play calling. So you couldn't let Mike Yurcich come back in year 2 as a starter of Drew Aller and just like hope it gets a little bit better.
Mm-hmm.
You've got to take a shot that you can bring in a bright, sharp offensive mind, give him some freedom, and bring out the best in Drew Aller next year. That's a necessity. And this was step 1 in that. All right. Coach check number 2 is Kalen DeBoer. Don't go to Texas A&M. Is that we're checking on him not to leave. Don't leave the North. Don't get swayed. Now, here's the problem. He makes $4.2 million a year. So Washington's got to double his salary. Yeah. His first contract, he's in year 2 at Washington. His first contract was 5 years, $16.5 million. Like barely over 3 a year, right? So they upgraded him after he had such a good year last year, extended him last November. He's probably, I don't know. You're going to the Big Ten. Your conference blew up. Why are you going to the Big Ten? For money. Okay. Pay the money to make sure Kalen DeBoer doesn't go anywhere, because I think this is a long-term successful relationship. I don't think they'll fall apart when Michael Penix leaves after this year. But already it's like everyone's list. Now, just so everybody knows, everybody know this? When everybody makes a list of possible coaches for a next hire, it's just to make the agents happy. So then they continue to be your sources.
Yep.
So like, it's like, where does it come from? It comes from the people who are trying to get their guys hired. So I'm not saying it's not real, but also it's not real. Kalen DeBoer, don't go. Stay in the North.
What is your confidence level that Washington will pony up? Because Chris Peterson made south of $5 million a year too.
To me, it's one of those things like, what? This was my question with everything that's ever happened with the Big Ten. The Big Ten network expansion, giving up tradition, playing, letting TV. What's the money for? Because you're doing it for money. What's the money for? So part of the money has to be to keep your good coaches that help you win. And so if Washington is going to help blow up its own conference, go to the Big Ten and then be like, wow, we can't play Kalen DeBoer $6.5 million. What are we doing here? Then it's then just get rid of your football program, because nothing, it doesn't make any sense.
Mm-hmm.
So they have to do it. They have to do it. I don't think he's not he doesn't want to go to the South. He was at Fresno State. He was at Indiana. He's fine. He's
from South Dakota, right?
He doesn't want to. Don't go. But yeah, they have to make sure that he doesn't have any reason to go. So I think they will. And if they don't, we will set Washington on fire in this program.
I don't think he will. Washington has a lot to offer.
Lovely.
Yeah, great place to live and work from what I hear. Never been there.
Sound?
Yeah.
I don't have that in the College Station.
You can sailgate at their football games.
Yeah.
But good recruiting base, seemingly good resources, going to have a lot more money. I think he stays, but yeah. If we need to remind him, don't go. Yeah.
Good coach, pay him. All right, coach check, Matt Campbell. You were a little worried about Matt Campbell at Iowa State earlier this year. He's in year 8. He's making $4 million a year, and they are playing Texas on Saturday, while Texas is in first place in the Big 12, and Iowa State is in a 4-way tie for second at 5-2. Matt Campbell has his mojo back, man. Last season, it was only his second losing season. They're going to have a winning year this year. So you were worried, but now it's all okay, which means you can take the Michigan State job.
Yeah, my thing with Matt Campbell is very good for Iowa State. I don't want to dismiss what he's done there, making a regular winner, I think, out of a program that had not been. But I never viewed him as the second coming of Bear Bryant, like some other people did. And I just think people got a little overboard with their praise of him and what they thought he could be. But I think he's done an excellent job there, and he's done a good job turning this season around. I won't repeat my stat that I had earlier this year about his record in one possession games, but it's bad. But I also kind of think they're going to beat Texas this week.
Yeah.
So yeah, he's fine. He's doing a good job. I didn't think he was in jeopardy of losing that job. I think he's got too much cachet there. But yeah, we'll see if he ends up winning like 8 games this year if he tries to parlay that into something different.
You just thought he was overrated compared to the way a lot of media blows smoke up his butt.
Yeah, like he was going to be was going to be the savior of Michigan when it looked like Jim Harbaugh was on his way out the door. It's like I don't think that's true, but he's good at Iowa State.
He's only 43. He's in year 8 at Iowa State. I do think he'll end up in a bigger job at some point. He got an extension at Iowa State in February of 2021 that takes him through 2028. Again, he's making $4 million a year, which is pretty good for Iowa State. Since he got there, Iowa State in the Big 12 is 37-33. Texas in that same time is 40-29. So that's a lot of bad Texas, but it's also some pretty good Iowa State.
Texas A&M coach Matt Campbell.
Don't go, Matt. We can't let anyone go. Don't let them, like, you can look in the South. Texas A&M. You're not getting any Northern guys. We're holding on to them. Coach check 4 is Deion Sanders. Year 1, it's been super interesting. I still believe in Deion Sanders as like a program builder and a motivator and a guy who can connect with players and get them to play for him and then get them to play well for him. Their defense is not very good. Their offensive line is not very good. And he did not give the offensive coordinator much leeway before demoting him. Mm-hmm. The thing that I am the most curious about with Deion Sanders is that the recruiting is not huge at the moment. Like they're number 63 in the class of 2024 with Colorado's recruiting class. They have 2 guys committed in the class of 2025, including a pretty good quarterback from the South, Antoine Hill, who was a good get. But they also had like a top 100 national receiver from the class of 2025 decommit over the weekend. And one of the reasons he decommitted is because he said, I don't know if Deion Sanders is going to be there by the time I get there. So they're already like Colorado. It's like a different discussion. One's a Colorado discussion. One is a Deion Sanders discussion. It's going to be very difficult for Colorado if they like don't get a bowl trip out of this and Deion. Like, what if Deion Sanders is there for 2 years, never goes to a bowl, and then jumps for a bigger job? It's like, what did you really get out of it, right? You got some exposure, but what did Colorado really get? I still think Deion Sanders, as a head coach, who's making $5.5 million a year on his 5-year, $29.5 million contract, is in good shape, even though this is the second half of the season has gone sideways.
Yeah, he's fine, of course. He's got them with 4 wins. They won 1 game last year. Your question about like what does Colorado get out of it will be interesting because I think they put themselves in a fairly precarious financial situation to make this happen in the first place. So if they don't get anything out of it, that could set the program back, I think, quite a bit. My thing with Deion is, and you touched on it, like do you know what a roster is supposed to look like at this level? Because like when he showed up in Colorado and said like I'm bringing my luggage and it's Louis, it wasn't. He had Shador and he had Travis Hunter and like 1 or 2 other skill guys, and then the rest of it wasn't very good. And now, did he say that because he's Deion and that's just the thing that Deion says, or did he say it because he believed it? Because if it's the latter, I think that's a problem because his roster is just not going to be good enough, I think, to do the things that he wants to do there. If that is what they're doing from a talent evaluation standpoint.
I still think he's going to succeed. It's just a very difficult spot for the program to be like, our 4-6 coach is going to jump to a bigger job soon. It's like, what? And it's like, that's the spot they might be in. All right. Number 5 is Tom Allen at Indiana. He is in year 7 at Indiana. He has a gigantic buyout, which has been a huge topic of discussion. If they fired him after this season, they'd have to pay him just north of $20 million. That would go down significantly if they can keep him around for next year. You and I have talked a lot about Tom Allen's future, but like they're not giving up. Like they gave Penn State a run for its money 3 weeks ago. They beat Wisconsin 2 weeks ago. And then on Saturday, they went into overtime with Illinois. And so it feels like the program has been mismanaged in a lot of ways. They're 3-22 in the Big Ten in the last 3 seasons. But they didn't quit. And I think the not quitting is enough to keep him around for another year, given what his buyout is.
Probably. It's only because of, I think, what Indiana is sort of as an athletic entity. They're just not going to pay that money, I think. Unless there's some, like, I don't know, does Mark Cuban want to throw it down and say get rid of Tom Allen and bring in somebody else? Maybe. I think that's probably the only way that gets them there. It's not good enough. They have to get rid of him. I saw this stat as I was looking through some stuff on Tom Allen. He's 3-16 in his last 19 games against Power 5 opponents. The only team that's worse in that span is Vanderbilt with Clark Lee. It's really bad. Like what should Indiana be? Like I think a team that is competing for bowl eligibility more often than not, right? And the not maybe not much more than that, but they're just kind of embarrassing.
But they're not embarrassing the last 3 weeks. Like that is very.
They were up 27-12 against Illinois, and then gave up the next 27 points and lost. Like that was a bad loss.
And then but didn't they do a good? No, I guess they did a bad thing at the end. No, they did a good thing at the end because Illinois was winning, right? And then Indiana like scored in the last seconds to force the overtime. They're not quitting. Like they're not.
It's not. That's a player conversation, I think. Though that's not. Tom Allen also, I think, like gifted Illinois a touchdown by a terrible clock management in the first half.
They didn't. His team has not turned. Like credit to the players, but like they weren't like the heck with this guy. Like the last 3 weeks have been much. They're 1-2 in the last 3 weeks with 2 competitive games in the losses. Like that's much better than I expected from Indiana. And I think if they look dead, that's when you're like, you've got to suck up the 20 million because you're going to lose more money from nobody coming to games. I don't know if I was an Indiana fan, if I'd be like, oh God, why would you? They're fighting a little bit. No,
I mean they are, but are we at the point where like losing close is good enough for Tom Allen to keep his job?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Oh, we are definitely at that point.
Okay. Well, I wouldn't want to be there if I were an Indiana fan.
Lose close. Yeah, has the 11th highest salary in the Big Ten, but he's in the top 40 nationally with his salary at $4.5 million a year. The thing, so he already fired the offensive coordinator in the middle of the year. They're going to have a new offensive coordinator next year. Reminder: in 2019, he hired 2 new coordinators. The defensive coordinator was Kane Womack, who went on to be the South Alabama head coach, and the offensive coordinator was Kalen DeBoer. Yeah. Who's now doing his thing at Washington. So all Tom Allen needs to do, and that was probably actually their best year in 2019. They went 8-5, and it was real. They lost 4 Big Ten games to 4 ranked teams in the East. They lost a bowl game to Tennessee by a point, and they won all their other games. They went 5-4 in the Big Ten. They went undefeated in the non-conference. And then the COVID year, they had a better record, but it was kind of fake. That was all real. So all he has to do is make 2 awesome coordinator hires, and they're good to go.
Yeah, and they're only 9-25 since then.
Jake Dickert at Washington State is next on our coach check. They were 4-0 at Washington State, and then he kind of got in a fight with Lee Corso, and I think they're Corso cursed, and they haven't won since. 14-15 overall, took over in the middle of 2021 after the whole weird like Nick Rolovich vaccine thing. 7-6 last year, 4-6 now, but the 6-game losing streak, like, would you be wondering already, or is this just like a bad half of a season and Jake Dickert, kind of rallied the program previously and he gets a little bit of a mulligan here?
I think you probably give him a mulligan because also he's unknown, right? There's no track record of like, oh, I wonder how I'll handle this. I think you have to find out. And plus you don't want to have, a 4th head coach in like 5 years or 4th head coach in 7 years, whatever it is. I do wonder what Washington State wants to be, right? Like Mike Leach had some really good seasons there before he left to go to Mississippi State. Washington State's also in a weird spot with not having a conference. And I know that Jake Dickert earlier this year was like talking about some NIL stuff and do they have the resources to put a competitive team on the field? I think they would if they were in the Mountain West, which is something to consider. So I don't know. I think he probably gets one more, but they're falling off a cliff a little bit here. Like their defense is terrible and their offense has plateaued and probably even regressed since they beat Oregon State. So they got a lot of stuff to figure out and not a lot of margin for error there with the way they can acquire talent.
This has been an incredibly stressful year. We talk a lot about all the other things that head coaches have to deal with. Most of them don't have to deal with what conference are we going to be in. Right. Our conference exploded. And so he's had to try to hold that together. I do think he's still the guy to lead them into whatever comes next. And if they go into something like the Mountain West, which is definitely what they should do, and then try to compete at the top of that, that's a new reality. And it's just a different standard and a different context. And I think he deserves to get a shot at that, even though this has been rough. Next coach check is David Braun at Northwestern. He's the interim there. And after they went and beat Wisconsin on the road to get the 5-5 on Saturday, a bunch of the players and people around the Northwestern program were tweeting #remove the tag, meaning the interim tag. This guy had never been a head coach before. He was the defensive coordinator at North Dakota State last year. He was hired by Pat Fitzgerald to fix the defense. Instead, he has to take over the whole program. And he's like the first Northwestern coach to win at least 5 games in year one in like 120 years or something. Should they remove the tag for him?
Probably. I didn't have the time to go and do this research, and I just want somebody to do it for me. What's the track record of interim coach first year spark that actually leads to something substantial beyond that?
So like it's Jake Dickert is part of that too. Like I think it's like that's worth an off-season investigation, because I do think you can get very fired up about it. Usually the players want to keep the person because they know them and that person has helped guide them through a tough situation. But it doesn't mean that he's the best person for the job. I think they have to do it though. This was pretty messy. And I think people were assuming Northwestern was going to go 0-12. You like this for a particular reason though, right? Why do you like Northwestern's success so much?
Because it kills the mythos of only Pat Fitzgerald could do this here. Pat Fitzgerald, who was 4-20 in his last 2 years at Northwestern, and David Braun's got more wins than him in his first year. I just like I didn't like at Northwestern that like Pat Fitzgerald can just have absolutely terrible seasons and then just point back to the one time he had 10 wins with like, see, but remember when we did that? That was fun, right? Just like take this season that has 1 win in it, because that time I won 10 games. Like I didn't like the way that Northwestern fans were being treated when that was happening. So I like that this is killing that idea a little bit. And I agree with you. I think they do need to remove the interim tag and give them a shot.
I will say Pat Fitzgerald in his 17 seasons had a winning record in 9 of the 17. Randy Walker before him had winning records in 2 of 7 seasons. Gary Barnett, who like revitalized the program, had winning records in 2 of 7 seasons. So, and before that, they were like horrendous for 20 years. So I actually subscribe to the Pat Fitzgerald is the only guy who can do this. And I actually think like what he did with any level of consistency, even though they had deep downs, still had not been done there consistently before. But I think David Braun's got it. I think David Braun deserves a chance. I don't know if I give him a 10-year contract if I was Northwestern, but no. I would give him a 4-year deal at a fair rate and see what happens. All right, Dino Babers at Syracuse is next. He's 41-54. He's in year 8. Syracuse last year started 6-0 and then lost 5 straight. This year Syracuse started 4-0 and then lost 5 straight. They are coming off a win over Pitt. They still have a chance to get bowl eligibility. He makes about $4 million a year. Year 8, I don't know. It feels like maybe it could be coming to an end, and I think there's an interesting candidate out there for them. But this was a big win over Pitt because they went to their special place.
They went to Yankee Stadium, where I believe they're now 8-3. So if you ever see that coming up on the schedule, you want to make a little money on the money line. They were an underdog in that game.
That's like a better winning percentage than the Yankees have in the
at least lately, yeah. I don't know about it's more about Syracuse than it is for it's like who's taking that job. If you fire Dino, who wants that job?
So I guess here's the thing. So one of the things that hurt Syracuse this season is that they lost their defensive coordinator, who got hired away by Nebraska, and it seems like Tony White. People think he's doing a good job at Nebraska. And so if you just said like right away, you want to come back? He doesn't have like huge Nebraska ties or anything, but he was the defensive coordinator there for 3 years. And if you offered it, it's a Power 5 job, first chance to be a head coach, and maybe try to get some of that, this guy ran a good defense, get some defensive identity in the ACC. Would you try?
If I am a young up and coming coach with a promising future, I'm not taking that job. That's a fallback job. That Jimbo Fisher should take that job.
All right, that's what we should have played here. Jimbo Fisher's northern landing spots. Boise State's open. Andy Avalos got fired at Boise State. Jimbo would love Idaho. Don't you just think he would love Idaho? He probably has like a $20 million ranch in Idaho already. What are you going to do with $77 million?
Yeah, it's a lot of cattle.
All right, number 9 on our final coach check is Jeff Hafley. You just love to talk about Jeff Hafley, who is winning and is successful, and it is not enough for Bill Landis.
No, I mean it's enough. I think it's enough for Boston College, right? Like what Boston College wants to go to bowl games. Their thing now is like they have a chance to win 8 games for the first time, I think, since 2009. And Jeff Hafley's like pumping that up, and he's like, we got a chance to win more games than they've won in a long time around here. Or you can just win one more, and you're still Steve Adazio. He's fine. He's doing a fine job there. My thing with Jeff Hafley is like they don't beat anybody good. So he has, I think he's 21 wins there now.
21-24.
You want to guess how many of those wins are against teams that either finished with a winning record or currently have one? Like above 500?
4.
3.
Okay. That's not great.
Yeah.
He makes $3.1 million a year. They extended him after 2021. Like, as you said, Steve Adazio, the 7 years before Jeff Hafley, went 44-44. And he was either 7-6, 7-5, or 6-6 in 6 of his 7 seasons. Like, that's what they were. They were an exactly 500 team. Jeff Hafley's 21-24. This is his 3rd out of 4 seasons where he's won at least 6 games. They have Pitt and Miami left. They're 6-4 right now. I probably think this is what they are.
Yeah,
I don't know
anywhere,
how high they peak above this. And like beating bad teams to make a bowl is kind of a way to make a living at certain schools. And that might be what this. They were 3-9 last year, and people didn't like that.
No, it's fine. It's a fine way to make a living. I just don't want to hear his name come up for good jobs.
Okay. You're just mad at the media. You just don't like it when people are like, Penn State should fire James Franklin and get Jeff Hafley. Right?
That's exactly right. Yes.
Right. It's like James Franklin can't beat Michigan and Ohio State, and Jeff Hafley can't beat Virginia Tech. Right. And then people like Hafley. Like, hey, if Harbaugh goes to the NFL, it's fine because they'll either get Matt Campbell or Jeff Hafley, and your head explodes.
That's right. Yeah. If Michigan plays Northern Iowa and Holy Cross every week, I think they got a shot.
All right. That's our coach check, brought to you by the oil barons who are paying off Jimbo Fisher $77 million to do nothing. Just means more. All right. When we come back, we're going to talk about our playoff brackets next on Kings of the North. Doug Lesmerises and Bill Landis back on Kings of the North. Landis, we did an emergency Michigan Jim Harbaugh suspension version of Kings of the North at the end of last week that we certainly would welcome people to go sample if they have not. If you're wondering, like, hey, like a huge thing happened in Northern football since we did our main show a week ago and we're not talking a ton about Jim Harbaugh, it's because we already did it a lot.
Yeah, and it still holds up. I think as we recorded this on Monday, not much has changed in that story. Michigan's fighting it, which we talked about a little bit in that, like would they or won't they? Got into some of the impact of what we think could happen for Michigan on the field, which obviously didn't seem to matter a whole lot this past week against Penn State. But yeah, we broke it down for about an hour, right?
Yeah.
Everything you think you'd want to know there.
And just incidentally, if people care, it's the best takes you'll hear because there's a lot of terrible ones out there. Ours are the best. Playoff bracket. It's getting real. The playoff committee will announce its 3rd rankings on Tuesday night. Bill, what you and I have been doing the last several weeks is we are predicting what we think the playoff will be at the end of the year. We are never predicting, hey, what are they going to do on Tuesday? We are overall looking far ahead. Where are you right now for your playoff bracket that you think we will be at after the first weekend in December?
I'm steady, man. I don't know. I'll probably end up being wrong because I've been so consistent with my picks as we've done this last few weeks. So I'm still at number 1, Georgia, number 2, Ohio State, number 3, Florida State, and number 4, Oregon. So that's 3 undefeated conference champions in my top 3 seeds, and then a 1-loss Oregon Pac-12 champion is the 4th seed.
Okay. Mine is similar. I just had, well, it's not similar. It's different for it in 2 ways. I have number 1 Ohio State. I've gone back and forth. My first one a couple weeks ago, I had Ohio State number 1. Then last week I had Michigan number 1 and I had Ohio State out. And now I have Ohio State number 1 again. And that is just sort of my belief that the winner of the Ohio State-Michigan game will wind up as an undefeated Big Ten champ, and that will be enough to be number 1. And so it's like, well, how can a team go from number 1 to out? It's because I think Ohio State and Michigan at this point are fighting for one spot, and that spot is number 1. So I have Ohio State 1, Alabama 2, Florida State 3, and Washington 4. So I have 3 undefeated conference champs in Ohio State, Florida State, and Washington, but I have Alabama with 1 loss beating Georgia in the SEC title game. And so now, Landis, I want to get into some of the messy specifics. And I will say, once upon a time, this is our last chance to do it like this. Once upon a time, when we first started the college football playoff, I loved in week 7 being like, well, what if this happens? And what if this happens? And what if this happens? And what if there's 14 undefeated teams? What's the committee's going to do? Or what if there's no undefeated teams and they have to choose between 7 3-loss teams for the 4 seed? And you could wrap your head into a pretzel in the middle of October. And now that we're in year 10, I don't think that's fun anymore. And we're not going to have to do it anymore because next year with the 12-team playoff, we'll talk about seeding and that kind of stuff. But kind of it's like the good teams are going to be in.
Mm-hmm.
So we're not going to have to be thinking here about the idea of Georgia, the two-time defending national champ, in my bracket, losing one game and not getting in. And like, oh, what are you going to do? Let's zoom in on your bracket, though, right?
Mm-hmm.
You have Oregon at number 4.
Yeah.
As a one-loss Pac-12 champ, that you are saying they lost to Washington in the regular season. They're going to beat Washington in the Pac-12 championship game. What is your level of conviction that in that scenario, one-loss Pac-12 champ Oregon would get in ahead of one-loss non-champ Michigan? I guess the fact that Bama would have 2 losses, that takes care of them. But what about if Texas is a one-loss Big 12 champ? Like in your scenario, are you thinking Texas is that? Or do you have Oregon here at 4 because you think Texas loses, Bama's out with 2 losses, and you just think Oregon then gets in ahead of Michigan?
Yeah, I was not really factoring in Texas. Like I kind of think Texas might drop one here before the season ends, so they'd be out of that equation. I don't think a one-loss non-champ is threatening to a one-loss Pac-12 champion. Certainly not any 2-loss SEC team like in Alabama would be. My only holdup with having Oregon where I have them is because like you did an interesting thing with your bracket. You put Alabama 2 despite having 1 loss. Like would Oregon as a one-loss Pac-12 champ with arguably a better resume than Florida State despite having 1 loss, would they be ranked ahead of Ohio, of Florida State? That was the question I had in my mind. Should they be 3 or 4? Not should they be 4 or out? Okay.
What is your level of conviction that Oregon will beat Washington in the Pac-12 title game? And that's not locked in quite yet, but it certainly is more likely than not to be the Pac-12 title game.
Yeah, it's pretty strong right now. They've lost a field goal game on the road to Washington where I thought Oregon probably played better for the majority of that game. And since that game, I think the programs have gone in 2 pretty distinct different directions, with Oregon playing really well and Washington looking a little human. The thing with Oregon is like they've played that game and they've played Utah and have not had tremendous tests otherwise, which is a valid point, I think, for anyone who's sort of like questioning exactly how good Oregon is still. That's fair. I just look at a team that looks like pretty complete on both sides of the ball, and I don't view Washington the same way. And I think if they rematched on a neutral field, I feel pretty strong about Oregon winning that game.
All right, let's talk about Ohio State versus Michigan in this scenario. We both have Ohio State now beating Michigan. Where are you on the percent chance in your mind that Ohio State goes up to Ann Arbor and wins?
It's still close to 50-50. I think I was probably 51-49 last week before we saw Michigan play Penn State. I'm probably a little stronger on Ohio State. Maybe it's like 55-45. I think it's Ohio State's ability to throw the ball. I think that is the X factor for me. Now we don't know that they could have 40-mile-an-hour winds and snow for all we know at this point. But if I'm to believe that game will be played in good enough conditions for Ohio State to throw the ball, then I think that is the separating factor there. And seeing Michigan kind of like not be able to throw the ball. Now, they made a decision to not throw the ball, I think, against Penn State at a certain point. But for JJ to only throw 8 passes in that game, I think largely because they were worried about the effectiveness that they kept dropping back and trying to throw against Penn State, that was enough for me to think like, I think maybe that's where Ohio State can win that game, provided the elements are good enough for them to do so.
All right, let's talk about my bracket then, because I think mine is even more complicated than yours. And one of the complicating factors, the complicating factor, is Alabama beating Georgia in the SEC title game. I would say I think I'm stronger on Alabama beating Georgia than I am on Ohio State beating Michigan. So if I agree with you, I'm probably Ohio State, Michigan, same as you, has gone back and forth around 50-50 to me much of the year. Right now, it's currently like 52-48. I think I'm about 65-35 Bama over Georgia right now, because I think Jalen Milroe at his best at quarterback for Alabama is kind of like a next level of playmaker than anything Georgia has other than Brock Bowers. Now, Brock Bowers has been out, but he is coming back as the best tight end in the country. So I understand that's going to make a difference, but the Bama defense has been really good. But in my scenario, this is like what my playoff bracket is. So it's Ohio State 13-0, Bama 12-1, Florida State 13-0, Washington 13-0. And then that means Texas at 12-1, if they win out, would have a win over Bama, the same record, and not get in, which is like kind of against how I believe you should vote things. Hold that thought. Michigan would be 11-1 and Georgia would be 12-1. So like both one loss Texas, one loss Georgia, one loss Bama is a very complicated scenario here.
Mm-hmm.
And Texas, since losing to Oklahoma, has a Kansas State win in overtime, a win by 3 over TCU, and a win by 7 over Houston, where they had to stop Houston on 4th and 1 at the 10-yard line in the final minute to preserve that win. So Texas has been trying to lose. They have Iowa State and Texas Tech left, and then the Big 12 title game against either Oklahoma State, Oklahoma, or Kansas State. So, like, I don't think Texas is very good, but how do you think the committee might deal with the fact that Texas beat Alabama if Texas and Alabama both finished 12-1?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know that I want to be like if that scenario plays out. Are you scared? Like if you're Washington,
So I'm scared if you're Oregon. Like that's where I think a complicated.
If you have the
like
loss,
if Washington's undefeated, like they're not going to leave out an undefeated Power 5 conference champ. They're not. But if Oregon with one, like if they play a close game against Washington, now those two teams split. They have the same record. They split their 2 games. They're both close. I think you could wind up with the Pac-12 in a TCU Baylor situation from 2014 where you just leave out both and you put in Texas.
Yes, I agree with that. I think that, that's probably the likely scenario.
But I do think Texas is going to lose, as you said earlier.
Yeah. So do I. So I'm not like too hung up on it. But I didn't. When I first saw your group of 4 here, I didn't quite do all the math there and think, well, what if Texas only has 1 loss and wins the Big 12? Why? This is like a 180 for you on Alabama.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
Because I thought, well, they benched Jalen Milroe. And I was like, well, you can't rely on that guy because that guy's a turnover machine. And now Jalen Milroe is like makes 6 big-time throws a game, is an absolute pain to defend, both as a passer and a runner. They play great defense, and they're mad. And so I just think, like, if we're kind of getting down to like Jalen Milroe versus Carson Beck in an SEC title game, I don't think Georgia's special this year. So I think like the whole conversation the whole year has been like, I think this is, Michigan is better. This is the best version of Michigan in the last 3 years. I think this is the worst version of Georgia in the last 3 years. But do you think, what if Georgia in my scenario loses a close game to Alabama in the SEC title game? Would they get squeezed in ahead of somebody here? Now, again, we're talking about undefeated conference champs for the other 3 spots, but it's 2-time defending national champ Georgia that lost 1 game.
I don't think you can put them in over undefeated conference champ. I mean, the resume would still be pretty good, but no, I just can't see that happening. Why do you, so like, is it just because Washington's had enough games like in the middle of its schedule where it's like messed around a little bit that it would stay at 4 and not move up to 3 ahead of Florida State?
Yeah, I mean, that's probably a coin toss. And the fact, Washington's win over Oregon in my scenario in the Pac-12 title game would be a better win than Florida State over Louisville in the ACC title game. So Washington could get to number 3, but Florida State's messed around a little bit too, but I feel like Washington was like actually closer to losing than Florida State has been. So I think it's very close.
Yeah.
And you might be right that Washington get past them.
Yeah. In this scenario, you have a kind of a classic Rose Bowl there, right? Ohio State, Washington. And then just an absolute powder keg in New Orleans with Alabama and Florida State fans.
Yeah. See, we're just trying to make it fun. So again, like, will you miss this? So like all the things that we're worried about right now, like what if there's 5 1-loss teams fighting over the number 4 spot? It's not going to happen because stuff always works itself out to some degree. It could be somewhat complicated. It's not going to be the most complicated scenario that you could come up with right now. But will you miss this? Or will it just be like, okay, guess what? Like all the good teams are getting in and we'll fight over who's going to be 10 and 11.
I don't think I'll miss it because while I find it interesting and I like talking about it, I don't like the volume. Like people get really worked up about it, like screaming at each other about this stuff when it's only 4 and you got to figure out how to shoehorn teams in. So if it can soften the discourse a little bit by moving to 12, I think I'd rather have that.
And I will say, like, I used to like it. I actually think this was like a nice little 10-year window, and I'm sick of it now. So let's get to 12.
Yeah.
Like, I think we all, I certainly, I feel like my opinion changed maybe in a way that a lot of college football people's opinion changed, of like 4 was so much better than 2. It's like 4, 4, 4. You don't need more than 4. Oh, why would you let some bad teams get in? 4, 4, 4. Then it was like, this isn't quite as fun. And so, but I don't think we could have gone from 2 to 12. I think we had to be at 4 for a little while. And so I think it worked out. I think it's about the right amount of time. And I think by next year, we won't miss this. But we'll be sitting here talking about, oh, man, the seeding. Okay, what's the difference for Alabama and Georgia if they're the 2 seed versus the 7 seed? What's the difference for Ohio State, Michigan if they're the 1 seed versus the 5 seed, right? Like, we'll be talking about that kind of stuff. And, oh, man, you don't want to play. It's looking like the 11 seed is going to be, I don't know, like, you know, whatever. Or if Oregon loses to Washington as the 10 seed, but they could be a 10 seed that could win it all. You don't want to play them in the, like, that kind of stuff. I think that'll be, but it'll be like everybody's in, everybody that's good is in, but the seeding will matter. We'll be excited about potential matchups. We'll be putting up a bracket with 12 teams in it and being like, oh, cool. I really like your 6-11 game in the first round. Why do you think it's going to be that way? Without having to decide, like, if Georgia is not going to make the playoff if they lose once.
Yeah, and then on this show, we can make a meal out of Alabama having to come north to play a playoff game on a true road game.
Yeah,
can't wait for that.
Yeah, we'll be making meals. We'll be making a whole tailgate a year from now about the South coming north. All right, time to rank the best defenses and the best offenses in the North. That's next on Kings of the North. Time to rank the best Northern defenses here on Kings of the North. Landis, again, a lot of weeks we do best teams in the North, best players in the North. This week, we're not doing either of those. We're going to do best offensive units and best defensive units separately. We did a draft maybe like 6 or 7 weeks ago where we drafted the best units combined, but we haven't done this specifically. So we're going to start with the defenses. And like we often do with our rankings, we said, rank who's ever worth ranking. So we have 28 teams in the North, and we wound up with 9 defenses that we thought were worth ranking. And we basically agreed almost straight through from 1 till 9. That is Michigan at number 1, best Northern defense, Michigan Wolverines. Number 2, Ohio State. Number 3, Penn State. Number 4, Iowa. We were exactly the same on those top 4. Tied for 5th, Notre Dame and Utah, because we had those flip-flopped. And then a little bit of a variation here at the end, but we wound up with number 7, Oregon, number 8, Rutgers, and number 9, Iowa State. Those were the last 3 for us that were worthy of being ranked. Why did you have Michigan as the best defense in the North right now?
It's just hard not to when you start digging into the numbers, right? And there's a the numbers I think can lead you astray a little bit in this exercise with both the offenses and the defenses, and probably a point worth making more about the offenses when we get to it. And you have to use your eyes too. I thought the combination of the two still led me not strongly. Like I consider putting Ohio State 1, but I still landed on Michigan because the statistical dominance is there, and I know they have not played a ton of great offenses. Even the one they just played against Penn State is obviously not a great offense. But they looked apart when they played against Penn State as well. Like I think they're good at all 3 levels. They're not like overly disruptive, like similar to Ohio State. Ohio State does not generate a ton of havoc either, but they're both just very solid, hard to score against, situationally very good. And I think like when you start going through and checking all those boxes, like Michigan is just like, I don't know, not even a half step, like a quarter step better than Ohio State in a lot of instances.
So I think so. If you look at, again, you have to understand what you're looking at with a lot of this stuff. Fewest points per game in the whole country. These 4 Northern defenses are the top 4 defenses in fewest points allowed per game. Michigan is first at 7.5. Ohio State is second at 9.9. Iowa's third at 12.3. And Penn State is fourth at 13.1. When I was trying to sort out, I thought Iowa was fourth. Now, they have to carry so much burden. I did try to take that into account of like, you're kind of the whole team. And so that is more, you just have to play defense differently. They have much less of a margin for error than, for instance, Michigan does with a very successful offense, or Ohio State does with Marvin Harrison Jr. lurking around every corner. So I understood that. But still, I thought my top three were Michigan, Ohio State, and Penn State. Penn State has forced 20 turnovers this year. That is the most among Northern defenses. Michigan has forced 16 turnovers this year, which is 10th among Northern defenses. Ohio State has forced 9 turnovers this year, which is 28th out of 28 in the North.
Mm-hmm.
So in terms of being like disruptive, Ohio State is significantly less so. Michigan has more pressures than Ohio State as well. Like I think they get after the quarterback consistently a little bit more. I was tempted to put Penn State first because they forced so many turnovers, but I put them third because and as you pointed out after the game against Michigan, I said they're too aggressive sometimes. And then the other thing is like their coverage has not been great. Kalen King came in as like a preseason All-American kind of player. He's like 190th in the North in coverage grade among secondary players. Whereas I think Michigan with Will Johnson and Mike Sanderstill and the other guys can line up and cover you. Ohio State with Jordan Hancock and Denzel Burke and Davison Igbinosun can line up and cover you. I think Penn State is not as good as that this year, surprisingly so, which is why I had Penn State third. So then it comes down to Ohio State and Michigan. And I just do think both kind of don't let you score, but Michigan is a little more disruptive while doing it.
Yeah, the thing, because I agree with you on Penn State's coverage. Michigan has not had to play Ohio. We think that because of what happened against Ohio State. Michigan has not had to play Ohio State, and Ohio State can't play Ohio State. So,
and like Michigan and Ohio State both got to play the Mike Yurcich passing game that got him fired.
Yeah, right. So I think that's the point worth making with Penn State. I think either one of these three, I think, could be number one. I don't think anybody else could be. I think it's either one of these three could be number one. Penn State's number 2 in the country in havoc rate. Ohio State's number 50. There's a pretty big gulf there. But it's just the difference, I think, in like the way they go about business. Like Penn State blitzes more than Ohio State does. Penn State is more aggressive with its defensive ends than Ohio State is, to their detriment, I think, against Michigan. So I took that into account and kind of dinged Penn State a little bit for it, because I think you have to show an ability to like adapt and play a little bit of a different game when it requires one. And I think Ohio State's done a really good job of that this year. Like they faced a fairly wide range of offenses and ways that teams want to go about attacking you. And I think have like found a way to shut almost all of them down, with like the exception being the rushing yards they gave up against Rutgers. But again, I didn't find that particularly alarming. So I just like the soundness of Ohio State's defense gave me enough confidence to put them ahead of Penn State. But then it was like Michigan combines that with also generating more havoc than Ohio State.
What did you think of the idea that, like, for instance, after Rutgers ran the ball pretty successfully against Ohio State, Iowa's defense came out and shut Rutgers out in a game that you and I thought Rutgers was going to win. And again, like Iowa feels like they have 3 levels. Like Cooper DeJean is great in the secondary. Xavier Wampa is great in the secondary. Jay Higgins is as productive as any linebacker in the country. And then they still get after you a little bit up front. We're okay with Iowa 4th. We're definitely okay. Like that Iowa's below that top 3.
I'm okay with Iowa being 4th because Penn State threw the ball a little bit on Iowa.
Okay. They did give up They gave up 31 to Penn State. All right. Notre Dame and Utah tied for 5th, I think is right. They both just have some individual dudes, right? Howard Cross is getting it done up front for Notre Dame. We've talked about Jonah Ellis a million times on this show for Utah, who I think we view as potentially the best individual defensive player in the North. Are you okay with them winding up tied here?
Yeah, I think that makes sense. Again, they're more like Utah's number 1 in the country in third down defense. Like that is a distinguishing factor for them. But if you look at like success rate, Notre Dame is 14th, Utah's 15th. Havoc rate, Utah's 27th, Notre Dame's 38th. What else do I have here? Scoring, Notre Dame is 11th, Utah's 16th. Like they're relatively even. So I think you could flip flop any way you want.
So then of this list, I would say, so we have 9 teams ranked. Would you agree that Ohio State, Penn State, Iowa, Notre Dame, Utah, Rutgers, and Iowa State are defense first teams?
Yes.
Is Michigan a defense first team or an offense first team? Or are they exactly balanced?
They are more balanced than all the other teams we're talking about, but I think their defense is better than their offense.
So then I think we could argue the only offense first team that made our defense list is Oregon at 7, which is a pretty good sign for Oregon, right? Because again, I don't know that people talk about Oregon's defense very much, but when it comes to success rate, this is about, they're in the top 10 in the North. They get pretty good pressure. They have as many pressures as anybody in the North outside of Penn State. They don't give up a ton of explosive plays. Like this is a good defense at Oregon, right?
Yeah, I think they're fairly well balanced. Like I don't know that I look at them and think they have a tremendous weak link. I think their ceiling is probably like that of a top 25 defense nationally, maybe like a top 35 defense nationally. They have some individual talents that I think are pretty good. I don't know if they have a guy on that side of the ball that like terrifies you, but they're just like good, solid, and like certainly good enough for what they bring to the table on offense. And that's like a pretty big factor in why I think Oregon is a step better than Washington right now. It's like I kind of view them similarly offensively, but Oregon's defense I think is much better than Washington's.
And then, for the success that both Rutgers and Iowa State have had this year, and Iowa State is a step ahead because they're playing Texas this weekend with a chance to maybe get into the Big 12 title game, whereas like Rutgers has beaten who they're supposed to beat, and then they lose to who they're supposed to lose to. But if Rutgers and Iowa State don't have great defenses, they aren't having the kind of seasons they're having this year.
No, neither one of them is bowl eligible without the way they play defense, and they're not elite defenses nationally, but they're very good defenses nationally, and in the context of the North, I think they're elite.
So that's our top 9. Again, Michigan 1, Ohio State 2, Penn State 3, Iowa 4, Notre Dame and Utah tied for 5th, Oregon 7, Rutgers 8, Iowa State 9. And guess what? We didn't find 9 offenses to rank.
We sure didn't.
You kind of win. It's like you want it to be like, it's exciting. And then it's like you start doing stuff like this and it's like, oh, the North is twice as good at defense as they are at offense. We'll rank the best Northern offenses next after this. Time to rank Northern offenses now, Landis. And we only got to 5. And there kind of wasn't a 6, was there?
No, you'd have to really squint.
Yeah.
I think to get to a 6 that you feel like deserves to be here.
So our top 5, we have Washington and Oregon tied for first. And that's because you had Oregon first and I had Washington first. We'll talk that out. Michigan is 3rd. Ohio State is 4th. And Oregon State is 5th. And that's all we could do. Let's start at the top. Is this discussion between Washington and Oregon mostly stylistic? Because again, we've talked about it a million times, the average depth of target for Michael Penix and Bo Nix this season. Michael Penix is 7th in the North at 11.1 average depth of target. So how far the ball goes in the air on each throw, 11.1 yards. Bo Nix is last in the North at 6.9. Is it just like kind of a more downfield passing game versus a quick hit passing game? Or is there something else to this that factors into this discussion? And for instance, like why do you have Oregon first?
I think it's balance for me. Like if they passed the rule tomorrow that said you can't throw the ball anymore, I think Oregon will be just fine and Washington would never win again. That's being dramatic, but I do think that's it. Like Oregon kind of can do, I think, everything. And do they throw the ball down the field as deadly as Washington does? No, I don't think anybody in college football does. But I think they can throw the ball down the field well enough when they have to. The screen game, I think, is pretty deadly. Their offensive line is very good. They have dynamic backs. Bo Nix is a playmaker in addition to being a pretty good thrower, and they can run the ball. If they want to line up and play man ball, I think they can do that. So, and I'm not convinced that Washington can. So that was the tip in Oregon's direction for me. Is like I just think they can do more things better than Washington can.
Early in the season, I think this answer was Washington. Through like the first, just like the relentless nature of the downfield passing game with Washington just felt to me like next level compared to anybody. Then Washington sort of felt like where people figuring out a little bit. I agree with you, but the fact about the Oregon run game versus the Washington run game. We love Bucky Irving, right? Mm-hmm. Dynamic dual threat back. And he is a problem every time he gets the ball in his hands as the running back at Oregon. But Dylan Johnson, the last 2 weeks for Washington, He ran it 26 times for 256 against USC and got Alex Grinch fired. So I don't know. Do you not count performances after a guy gets it's like the Michigan defense? They were really good against Penn State. It's like, yeah, but the guy got fired. And it's like, oh, Washington ran the ball against USC. It's like, yeah, but the guy got fired. Do you give credit to making a guy get fired, or do you not give credit because it's like, oh, well, anybody could do it?
No, I think you give credit for getting a guy fired because you put it on him better than anybody did, and then he lost his job because of that. Yeah.
So then Dylan Johnson followed that up against a much better defense against Utah with 23 carries for 104 yards. Also caught 2 passes for 28 yards. So like it felt like for a time they had no run game. Mm-hmm. They found I think enough of a run game the past 2 weeks to lead me back to Washington, and
That's
then.
Fair.
I guess maybe I would believe like Oregon's more consistent, right? That Bo Nix has a better like adjusted completion percentage than Michael Penix and that kind of thing. Like, but I'm still more scared of Washington. And just the idea that they're just going to come out for first down, second down, third down, and throw 3 20-yard passes. And all they have to do is complete 1. And that attacking nature is still a little more frightening to me. I do wonder if Oregon, and it's almost like one of these reverse things. Like it's you read the Encyclopedia Brown books as a young boy?
No.
You're not familiar with Encyclopedia Brown?
I'm familiar. I never read them. Yeah.
Oh, no, never chose to read them.
Yeah.
Until I was like 20. I thought his name was Eucelipede Brown because just in my head, like you read a thing and it's like, it's the word Eucelipede. Then someone says it and you're like, what? So there's like a thing in Encyclopedia Brown, I think, where it's like you go into town, right? You go into like a Western town, maybe just like a regular town. And there's 2 barbers and one barber has a good haircut and one barber has a terrible haircut. And which barber do you go to? And you go to the barber with the terrible haircut. Because that means the barber with the terrible haircut, that barber had only one choice to go to. He had to go to the other barber who gave him a terrible haircut. And the barber with the good haircut got the good haircut from the other barber. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You get it?
Yeah, I get it. Yeah.
So it's like I'm giving Washington's offense more credit because they had to face Oregon's defense, which is actually good. And Oregon's offense had to face Washington's defense, which is not very good. So the fact that Oregon has a better defense help me make Washington number 1 on offense. It's the haircut problem.
That was the point that I alluded to when we're talking defense is like Oregon's numbers are crazy good. They've kind of only played one good defense this year when they played Utah.
And even that, like, I'm curious they have dudes. They absolutely have dudes. Again, Bucky Irving and Troy Franklin made our midseason All-North team. But if Oregon got to Bama or Georgia or Ohio State or Michigan or like a defense that's as tough as Utah's but has like the next level of athletes and they're hitting a lot of short stuff and letting those dudes go, like would that work as well? I don't know. Where I feel like the Washington onslaught, even against a good secondary, they'll take their chances. The other thing for Washington is Jalen McMillan basically hasn't played in a month and a half. He's been trying to come back and getting in some games, but not really doing anything. And if they get him back, I mean, he was one of the best receivers in college football. He had 1,000 receiving yards last year. If they get him all the way back, I think that helps elevate Washington even more. So I do you think it's close? I think it's close. And we just a little bit of a preference for each of us here.
Yeah. I definitely think it's close. Yes.
People got the haircut thing, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I enjoyed that. It was good.
Yeah. All right. Number 3 is Michigan. You had Michigan. Did you have Michigan 3rd on your list?
I think so, yeah.
I had Michigan 4th on my list. I actually had Ohio State 3rd, and you had Ohio State 5th. And so this is a lot of this discussion is about Ohio State because it's like, is it consistency? Is it every down? Is it your belief in the quarterback? Or is it like dudes who might pop? So I wound up putting Ohio State clearly behind Washington and Oregon, but ahead of Michigan and Oregon State, because it's like, success rate, no. Like quarterback play, I'd take J.J. McCarthy, but Marvin Harrison Jr., Healthy Emeka Ibuka, Travion Henderson, I'll take that group of skill guys over Michigan's guys, over Oregon State's guys. How did you try to sort out these three? Who I think these three are kind of close.
I think they're very close. I think you could put them in any order you want to. I wasn't exactly sure what to do because, like, if you go purely off data, you get Michigan, Oregon State, Ohio State, and it's not particularly close.
Agree. Yes, I agree with facts. With
but also,
numbers. Yes,
Marv.
Also, I know.
So, I don't know how to weigh that. Like, if you're asking me which player on all these offenses would you want the most, the answer is Marv. But I didn't like. I was trying to like understand the spirit of the exercise, I guess, because I agree with you. Like Ohio State's dudes, like Marvin Harrison Jr., fully healthy Emeka Ibuka, Travion Henderson, explosive. If you're going to tell me Kyle McCord is going to be in a good way to get those guys the ball the way he needs to, I think Ohio State's ceiling is higher than Michigan and higher than Oregon State's as an offense, and comparable, frankly, to Washington and Oregon's if we're talking about hitting on all cylinders and like the peak version of that offense. We just haven't seen it a lot. We saw it probably last week against Michigan State, but that's really the only time we've seen it. Because even in the other games where they put up points, like Western Kentucky, which is a bad G5 team, and Purdue, and it wasn't quite like it was against Michigan State. And we've seen these other offenses just like hit that stride more consistently than Ohio State has. So I think it's Ohio State's inconsistency that led me to put them fifth. But if the question is like whose ceiling do you think is the highest, I think Ohio State might be number one.
To me, it's a little bit of like if you were having a draft and you're trying to take an offense into a playoff game, right? And that's a little bit like where you're playing.
Mm-hmm.
Is this to play in November in a regular season game, or is this in a dorm or warm weather in a playoff situation? Because that's a very different Ohio State offense. We saw it last year. Are you taking the Ohio State offense versus Michigan or the Ohio State offense versus Georgia, right? Mm-hmm. So, there are a lot of pieces to like on the Oregon State offense, right? I mean, I do think DJ Uiagalelei has been like a good captain of the ship this year, and then Damian Martinez is electric. And they have a couple of Bolden and Fenwick, a couple other guys. Like they have dangerous guys with the ball in their hands. And I do think just like success rate, relentless, who's more likely to put together like a 12-play, 75-yard, 7-minute touchdown drive? Of these three teams, Michigan first, Oregon State second, Ohio State third. Not even close. Again, just like consistency quarter after quarter. But danger, I think in this exercise, I chose danger. So I chose Washington over Oregon, danger. And then I chose Ohio State over Michigan and Oregon State, danger. It's just how I roll, man.
Yeah, you're a dangerous guy. People say that. People say that about you. That's probably the right lean. I have look at this. Look at this. I got too many
data.
Numbers. I got too many numbers here.
You chose data. I chose danger.
I chose data. You chose danger. I think danger is the right way to go.
Do you have a level lighter there? You want to set your data on fire? That'd be dangerous.
I do actually, but I don't want to, get the smoke detector going.
Yeah. All right. So these are, and then that's it. So only 5 of 28. Washington and Oregon tied for first, Michigan third, Ohio State fourth, Oregon State fifth. So we want to get a sense of this.
If we did this 3 weeks ago, would you have Notre Dame here?
Yeah, but like before Mitchell Evans got hurt.
Yeah.
And then every Notre Dame writer started saying like this is the most embarrassing offensive performance that we have ever seen. So there was a time like Notre Dame at its best. What I thought Sam Hartman would be, and it turns out probably wasn't. And then also there, as we said, like Audric Estime, great. Mitchell Evans, great at tight end, but hurt. Receivers never developed. Great tackles, but it never they are not as good as the sum of their parts, especially when some of their parts are hurt. Like they have good parts, but they're like their offense is not dangerous, especially right now, right?
Yeah, no, it's not. And also, like if you me being a slave to the numbers here, in everything other than explosiveness, Penn State stacks up quite well. But I have eyeballs, so that they didn't make my list.
And like if you were just playing like 2-on-2 and the 2 was Shedeur Sanders and Travis Hunter, like I'd put Colorado on here too. But offensive lines matter. There was a time when Colorado, I still have respect for the guys that can catch the ball there and the way Shedeur Sanders can like diagnose stuff and get the ball where it needs to go. But it's not functional anymore over any kind of consistent period of time. So, okay, when we come back, it's time to start looking ahead. The best games of the week in Northern football next on Kings of the North. All right, Landis, let's look ahead at the best Northern games. We'll save the best game for our look-ahead focus at the end, but we'll start off with the Michigan Wolverines. Michigan is at Maryland for a noon kick on Fox. Michigan, a 3-touchdown favorite, and we do not know if Jim Harbaugh will be on the sideline because Michigan has a hearing on a temporary restraining order scheduled for Friday. If they get it, he will coach. If they don't get it, he will serve the second game of his regular season suspension. That TRO hearing really matters, Landis, because it also affects whether he's going to coach against Ohio State the next week. So I don't know what we think matters for this actual game, but probably Friday is more important than Saturday for Michigan football.
Yeah, I suppose so. I don't know. I guess like there's an emotional element there, right? Like if Jim Harbaugh has this hearing and then he doesn't get it, and then because I think there's a lot of confidence that around Michigan that they're going to get him back. There was a lot of confidence they were going to have him back for the Penn State game, and that didn't matter, I guess. Although I thought Michigan played kind of flat for at least a little bit of the beginning of that game, so maybe that can happen here if Jim Harbaugh doesn't get his TRO granted. This is the same spot last year where Ohio State went up to Maryland the week before playing Michigan and kind of almost lost. So I don't know if I foresee a similar situation here. Maryland won a gross game at Nebraska 13-10 last week. They've just really kind of fallen off, even though they did snap a losing streak there. But maybe you like the 3 touchdowns because it's like a letdown look ahead spot for Michigan. But I don't Jim Harbaugh or no Jim Harbaugh. I don't think Michigan has any problems here.
Yeah, I just put it as a game because like all eyes on Michigan right now. They're just like they're the center of the college football universe, not for what's happening on the field, although what's happening on the field is really good football on both sides of the ball, but because of what's happening off the field. So you got to keep Wolverines on the brain. Next one is Rutgers at Penn State, also at noon. A lot of noon games in the Big Ten this week. It's on Fox Sports 1, FS1. Penn State is at home favored by 19.5. And you are curious if anybody should be on alert here for this Rutgers defense to come into Happy Valley and create some problems.
It just feels like a big number for an average offense with a now interim play caller against a pretty good defense. And Ohio State, its offense, which I think is significantly better than Penn State's, won by 19 when it played at Rutgers. Now this game's in Happy Valley. I think that'll matter somewhat, although I think that crowd will be very subdued for a noon game after Penn State just lost to Michigan. There's like body blow theories on both sides of this, right? Like Penn State having just played Michigan, Rutgers coming off back-to-back games against Ohio State and Iowa. I don't think either one of these teams is going to be in particularly great form. So it could be pretty ugly and pretty low scoring. I don't think it's like a upset spot because I just don't think Rutgers offense is good enough for that. But it could be a Penn State's offense still doesn't look like it knows what it's doing spot.
I'm curious. Listen, the last guy got fired because James Franklin felt like they did not get the quarterback into any kind of rhythm. So they're going to come out and throw the ball and try to let Drew Aller be Drew Aller a little bit. And I'm very curious if it's going to be like, oh, he's good.
Or
what are they doing? Right? I mean, is that I've been waiting. I am trapped. I spent 2.5 years waiting for Graham Mertz to be good at Wisconsin. What if Graham Mertz is good was something I said 100 times. I might be on that with Drew Aller right now, but what if Drew Aller's good?
He certainly has a better chance of being good than Graham Mertz does.
Okay. I feel better. Thank you. Next one is Illinois at Iowa, the last stand of the Big Ten West. This is 3:30 on FS1. Iowa at home, favored by 3.5. If Iowa wins, Iowa clinches the West because Iowa only has 2 Big Ten losses right now. Everybody else has at least 4. So the only way that Iowa does not wind up in the Big Ten championship game is if Illinois, led by former Hawkeye player Brett Bielema, pulls this upset, and then Nebraska beats Iowa on Black Friday, and then that just drops Iowa into a tie. And I don't know what the tiebreakers would be, and it depends how many people are tied and all those kind of things. But it starts here, Landis. Illinois must save the world. Can they do it?
What do you think they're going to do at quarterback? Because John Paddock is rifling that pigskin, but like Luke Altmaier is available, I think, for this game.
Oh yeah,
and he's not been terrible
tomorrow. No,
but he's not been terrible.
John Paddock threw for 400 yards last week.
I know, and he got them the win against Minnesota too.
Yeah,
I'm with you. I just don't know. I wonder if in Brett Bielema's mind is it that cut and dry? Because Luke Altmaier was not terrible.
No. Yeah. That's not a shot at Luke Altmaier. There've been a lot of. He's like in the middle of transfer quarterbacks.
Yeah,
right. There have been some excellent transfer quarterbacks. There have been some not very good transfer quarterbacks. Luke Altmaier, at least has moved the ball for Illinois. But John Paddock's been on fire, brother.
Yeah, and Luke Altmaier gives you more as an athlete too, like running the ball. I don't know. Like I wonder. He has been on fire throwing the ball. Like him and Isaiah Williams has like become Montana and Rice the last 2 weeks.
I mean, we talked about Isaiah Williams last week again against a very good Iowa secondary. Like I'm kind of fired up to see it. There's huge stakes. The fate of college football as we know it is on the table, but it also could be like a really interesting game. Isaiah Williams is second. So Marvin Harrison Jr. has 1,063 receiving yards. That leads the Big Ten. Isaiah Williams from Illinois has 893. That's second. Nobody else in the Big Ten has more than 681. So like he is way out there. And he's been awesome. And like, let's see Isaiah Williams and Cooper DeJean go at it, man. I'm here for it.
Yeah. 3 touchdowns beats Iowa, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think. I can see it.
I know, but I feel like I've been saying that all year. And Iowa's like 17-2, whatever Iowa is. They keep winning. Credit to Kirk Ferentz.
Did he cry post game?
I guess he did. I saw it looked like a still shot of crying.
Yeah.
They fired his boy. What are you gonna do? I mean, it's his fault because he hired him. But,
right.
Not a victim. Let's make it very clear. Not a victim. Wake Forest is at Notre Dame. And this is only on here because it's crazy and goofy. 3:30 on NBC. Notre Dame at home is favored by 25. And Sam Hartman used to play for Wake Forest. So does that mean Sam Hartman's like everyone always talks about revenge just any time that you have any previous association with somebody? And do you go through life constantly seeking revenge? Like you've worked for The Athletic, you work for Cleveland.com. Would people be like, oh, Landis is out for revenge on The Athletic? It's like, no, I just used to work there.
Yeah, I'm not a vengeful person.
No. Oh, see, I am.
Yeah.
But even in that scenario, I'm not out for revenge. So I don't know what they're going to say. Like, oh, Sam Hartman's like, he knows the people. Like he knows the security guards and the trainers and the assistant coaches and everything, right? A bunch of former teammates. I don't have a handle on how I think it's going to affect Sam Hartman for what we had described recently as a not very good Notre Dame offense the past few weeks.
I don't have a feel for how it'll impact him either. Like he left on good terms, right? He left because he saw an opportunity to go play for a team that he thought might have a shot to make the playoff and probably help his draft stock. Neither of those things have happened, but it was a sound decision, I think, when he made it. So I don't know. I'm mostly curious about like Notre Dame's offense. Like they were off last week. Did they figure anything out? Did they know how to complete passes to receivers now, or is that still a thing they're going to have to work through? So I don't know. 25-point spread for an offense that looks pretty mediocre at the moment is a big number.
Yeah. And the idea of like Wake Forest knows what Sam Hartman does well. I don't know. I feel like they might be able to figure it out a little bit.
Plus, like Sam Hartman spent 6 years throwing the ball to guys in Wake Forest uniforms. He might have flashbacks.
That's true. That's true.
Throw 6 picks in this game.
So that again is on NBC at 3:30. 4:00 on Fox. That's Oregon at Arizona State. Oregon is favored by 22 in this one. And I just put this on here, Landis, because people need to keep an eye on Oregon. They're lurking. Since their Washington loss, they beat Washington State by 14. They blew out Utah. They blew out Cal. And then they beat USC, pretty handily, won by 9, 36-27 last week. So they haven't had, like, that Oregon game was pretty big, but they're kind of just like taking care of business and slowly becoming like a popular dark horse national champion pick. And so people just should be keeping an eye on that.
Yeah, I think they should be. Arizona State has been like a little bit of a pain in the butt to some teams this year. Like they gave Washington a game. They play really hard. Arizona State does. They don't have any good players. Kenny Dillingham's got his hands full trying to turn that program back into a winning program. But they do play hard. which is, and they're not playing for anything. They're not eligible for the postseason this year. They're just kind of playing for pride and trying to upset somebody, or at the very least, make it a not fun afternoon when you have to play them. So they have that in them. They did. Arizona State beat UCLA, I think, this past week, didn't they? Like it's a team that can find a level that I think maybe could challenge Oregon a little bit. So if Oregon goes out there and steamrolls them, I think the momentum that's behind them as a trendy pick would only grow stronger.
And then again, Oregon State next week to end the regular season, and then potentially Washington and Pac-12 title game. So like keep an eye on Oregon. Last one for the regular look ahead is Texas at Iowa State. We mentioned it previously. This is a nice primetime showdown at 8 p.m. on Fox. Texas is favored by 8. Texas has one loss in the Big 12 to Oklahoma. There's a 4-way tie for second with 2 losses in the Big 12. Iowa State is part of that. This is like a huge opportunity for Iowa State, and they sometimes take advantage of these opportunities, and Texas has been trying to lose. Are you calling the upset here?
I kind of want to. Jonathan Brooks, Texas's running back, is out for the year. He tore his ACL last week. And the rest of that Texas offense, like I don't know. When I watch them, I don't find them particularly impressive. And Iowa State's defense is pretty good. Texas
like
is
Xavier Worthy, right? People like Xavier.
Yeah, people like Xavier Worthy, but it's not like Quinn Ewers is out there like slicing and dicing teams. And Texas is very good on both lines, which is probably all you need to be in this game, maybe to win it comfortably. But there's enough history here. Like Matt Campbell's been pretty good against Texas. Iowa State likes to play spoiler. Iowa State is still alive for the Big 12 title game if some things can break its way. And Texas does feel a little vulnerable. So I like the 8. I don't know if I'm quite there on the pick the total upset, but I could probably get there by the end of the week.
Yeah, primetime game to keep an eye on. When we come back, though, we'll get into the best Northern game of the week on our Look Ahead Focus next on Kings of the North. All right, Landis, best game of the week, not even close in the North. Washington at Oregon State, 7:30 on ABC. I think this line opened at Washington favored by a point, and now it's Oregon State favored by a point. So we're talking about like Washington undefeated, top 5 team in the country, but going on the road in what's basically a coin flip game against Oregon State. And I remain very sad that Oregon State didn't find a way to come into this game with either undefeated or with only 1 loss. Instead, they're at 8-2, which means like they're not in the national title picture. They still can make the Pac-12 title game, though. They just have to beat Washington and Oregon the next 2 weeks.
That's it.
Do it, probably. I absolutely can see a path for Oregon State to win this game because they are efficient. They will get rolling on offense. I think they'll control the ball a little bit when they're at their best. And if Washington's off, which they have been at times, you know, they've had some weird games where if the level of opponent was a little better, Washington might already have a loss by now. How much is Washington in danger here?
As much as they have been, I think. It's not quite playing Oregon, but it's close enough for me. It's on the road against a solidly top 15 team, I think, in Oregon State that is good on both sides of the ball, has offensive balance, I think can win games a few different ways depending on how things go. So this is a really difficult test for Washington. Washington has to play its best, I think, to win this game. I don't think there's a version of this game where Washington messes around in some of the ways it's messed around the last few weeks and ends up winning.
And neither of these teams have great defenses, right? Not.
I think Oregon State's is a little better, but yes,
better than Washington's. Now, Washington last week shut out Utah in the second half to kind of help salt that game away. And so like that was a real thing, right? They're losing 28-24 to Utah at the half, and they end up winning 35-28. That might have been the best Washington defense that we've seen so far. But I do feel like there are so many lopsided teams in the Pac-12, right? It's like, okay, when they played Utah just has so many injuries. They haven't had their guys on offense. That's a defense first team. And so, all right, if Washington's really going to do something defensively against Utah, you have a chance to do that. Then the week before, they had a shootout with USC. It's like USC is so bad, their defensive coordinator got fired. That's a great offense. Arizona State's the game that Washington didn't score an offensive touchdown and took a pick six for them to win that game. And again, in a world where Arizona State is like one of the two worst teams in the Pac-12, even though they're kind of ornery. And so, Oregon State is 31st in the nation in scoring defense. Washington is 50th, right? So they don't give it up as much. And Oregon State scores almost as much as Washington does. Mm-hmm. Oregon State is 14th in the nation in scoring offense. Washington is 5th. And Oregon State's, we rank their offense, man. So both these teams in the North, we ranked their offenses and we didn't rank their defenses. And it's funny. It's two old quarterbacks, man. Yep. TJ Uiagalelei and Michael Penix have been around the block. And both teams have playmakers offensively. I think this game, though, is like low 30s, high 20s. Like, is that, I don't think this is like a 49-45 game. I also don't think it's a 21-14 game. I think this is like 31-28.
I kind of think both teams might score like damn near every time they have the ball, but really? They're not gonna have the ball a lot because of, I think, the nature of Oregon State's style of play. I think Oregon State will like dictate the pace of play and make it a limited possession kind of game. But I think Washington will probably be able to throw it on Oregon State, and I think Oregon State's going to be able to run it on Washington. It's like those are the two things that the defenses don't do particularly well. Washington State and Arizona to a lesser extent, but still pretty good, threw it on Oregon State pretty well. And then USC ran for 200 yards against Washington, and so did Oregon, ran for 204 against Washington. And I can see Oregon State being capable of rushing for 200 yards in a game like this too. It is funny, like if you look at stuff like, I was just looking at a game on paper, they had like their game preview thing. EPA per play margin, success rate margin, and yard per play margin, Oregon State's better than Washington. It's a good team, man. It's not like it's a toss-up game for a reason. I don't know, but there might be people out there who are surprised to see that it's a toss-up game. Oregon State's good.
Oregon State's so good. I'm so mad that they aren't more in the mix. I think they're similar to Michigan. Mm-hmm. They're like the West Coast version of Michigan. Obviously not as talented, but I think they can be just as much of a problem on both sides of the ball. Really good offensive line. We knew that coming into the season. So if Oregon State beats Washington and Oregon back-to-back, holy moly, man.
Yeah.
They'll be in the Pac-12 title game. If Washington loses this, then Washington gets Washington State to end the season. They'll win that. Washington will still be in the Pac-12 title game. But my version, I think a lot of people, of the theory of the case for the Pac-12 coming into the year was it's too good, and they're going to all beat each other up, and they're not going to get anybody in the playoff. And here we have Washington winning a close one with Oregon and then escaping a little bit, and they're undefeated. And it's like, oh, are they going to buck what we thought would happen? And now it feels like, oh no, it's going to be that you're going to wind up potentially in a Pac-12 title game with one loss Washington versus one loss Oregon. You're not going to have an undefeated champ, and they're going to get aced out because the Pac-12 is so good. Mm-hmm. But if that's going to happen, because like it would even if Oregon beats Washington in the Pac-12 title game, I think the Pac-12 needs that to be Oregon beating undefeated Washington to like propel Oregon. If it's one loss Oregon beating one loss Washington, it's not as cool. The committee's not going to take as much notice. So
yes,
this feels like the kind of game that Oregon State's going to win because that's what the Pac-12 is all about this year. But I don't know. Like, I love Oregon State, but I kind of want Washington to win because I want the Pac-12 in its final year of existence to be rewarded with the playoff berth, because I think the quality of the conference deserves that. Yeah, I just don't know if it's going to happen.
Yeah, I'm with you. I would be pretty bummed out if the Pac-12 ends up not getting on the playoff stage, because I think this conference has 3 of the best, maybe 12 teams in the country, with Washington, Oregon, and Oregon State. My lean is a little bit Oregon State. I will say, like, I think I said this maybe 2 weeks ago when Washington was staring down the USC, Utah, Oregon State, all 3 in a row. Like, I think I said like they could lose all 3. I was expecting them to lose one. They won the USC game kind of the way it needed to be won, just won it in a shootout. To your point, they kind of flipped it on Utah and played really good defense the second half of that game and took it from them. and now they'll have to do it again here. But this has been, I don't want to say like an impressive run for Washington, because I think their defense has left something to be desired, at least in 3 of the 4 halves of football they played the last 2 weeks. But if they get through this gauntlet, and I do consider that, with 3 wins, I don't know if there's another team in the country that can hold up a similar 3-game run that's as impressive as that.
Yeah. All right, 10-0 Washington, 8-2 Oregon State. I would suggest you guys try to tune in if you can on Saturday night. I think it'll be worth your time. I don't know what's going to happen. I like that Washington offense in my head still, of just like that attacking Washington offense when everybody's healthy. If Jalen McMillan is back and you add that to Roma Dunze and Jalen Polk and Penix at his best, that's hard for like anybody short of Georgia, Bama, Ohio State, Michigan to handle. And so if that's the Washington, but we haven't seen that Washington quite as much as we did early in the season. Okay. Another good week of Northern football. We appreciate you guys making us part of your Northern football experience. What we're doing here on Kings of the North right now is on our Kings of the North YouTube channel, on our podcast channel, on the podcast YouTube channel. We're dropping this Monday Kings of the North every week. But then when big news happens in the North, okay, we've done it twice so far. Mike Yurcich, did you think maybe Mike Yurcich was borderline rising to the level of emergency show? Or do offensive coordinators not deserve that?
No, it's enough of a fork in the road, I think, for James Franklin that I think we could have justified it.
Yeah. So we've only done 2 so far. Jim Harbaugh, Michigan suspension, and Brian Ferentz getting fired at Iowa. And when we do that, we do an emergency show. We only do it on our Kings of the North YouTube channel. It's not on the podcast YouTube channel, and it's not on our podcast feed. Okay. So all we're suggesting is, if you find this show interesting at all, subscribe to the Kings of the North YouTube channel, and then you'll make sure you get everything. Okay. And like, we got to build the show, man. Like, we're not trying to hide from you. We're not trying to make it difficult, but this is a YouTube show, and it's going to be 5 days a week eventually. And we just like want people to know what's out there. So sometimes, when you're talking about something as hot and spicy as Brian Ferentz, ooh, mama, we're saving that for the channel. What's spicier than that?
We're gonna build this out, but yeah, in the meantime, we're gonna be greedy and point you toward the YouTube channel, which is growing quite nicely after the Jim Harbaugh news. Yeah, thank
you, Jim Harbaugh. And also, you can follow us on Twitter at KOTNCFB, and we put little information in there, help you
Instagram.
What we're doing
too.
Instagram, the gram.
Yeah,
that's KOTNCFB as well.
Yep.
We'll eventually do dances there. For now, we're just talking football. We appreciate you guys being part of it. Thanks to our producer, Mike Yurcich, who makes us look good and sound good, putting in the work every week. Thanks to Bill Landis. Thanks to you guys for listening. I'm Doug Lesmerises, and that was Kings of the North.